So thank you for coming. I realize that not everybody in the room knows this. I'm actually competing right now against a session against my boss. So my boss was scheduled against me. She's in the big room over there. And at this particular moment, I actually identified, I think, 3 other sessions that I wanted to attend. So I'm just happy that y'all came here. So thanks for this. We're going to have, I think, a good conversation. And I think it's going to be different than the other conversations that have gone on here. I designed this to come into this conversation a little bit differently. So y'all come on in and just make sure you're seated beside at least one other person so that you can have some conversation when the time comes. There you go. All right, so we're going to start with a question to get us going. I want us to be thinking a little bit about this topic. So here's a question. I want you to think of one word. What stops innovation? Keep it in your head for a minute. What stops innovation? What stops change? Innovation, change. What stops innovation, change? One word. Aggregate level. Does everybody have a word? Have you come up? You actually have to participate today. So do folks have a word? Okay, ready? So we're going to, at the count of 3, we're going to go 3, 2, 1, and then you're going to say your word, okay? So 3, 2, 1. Exactly. It's noisy and chaotic, right? So that is part of what's stopping change. Now, what were some of the individual words? What did folks have? Fear. Fear. Who else had fear? Right? Fear. Can I tell you, I used to have a slide after this that said fear, right? Had it ready, had it prepped. But what I was more curious today about everybody else's words, less mine. Fear was one. What else? Inertia. Fear and inertia. I like those 2 words. Ownership. Regulation. I love it. What else? System. All right, so we have fear, ownership, regulation, system, inertia. Those are things that stop innovation. All right, keep those in your head for a minute. Here is our agenda. We're going to take a second and talk about this moment in time, how we got to this moment, what's going on. That's a little bit of the disruptive innovation piece. How did we get to this moment on our campuses? And we're gonna flash that moment in front of us, though we all probably know it so that we can understand it. We're then gonna take a little bit of time and talk about actual arguments against change. So over the last few years, I've compiled arguments against change. I've got over 50 different arguments against change. I've compiled them. We're going to talk about those today. Why are people stopping innovations? What are they saying that is stopping our change from happening? And then we're going to talk about what actually motivates people to innovate. So when they actually do something new and something different, what do they say about that new and something different, right? Why are they going to do it? For all of us, this is about what is stopping the changes we want, and how do we motivate people to do those changes? And embedded throughout this conversation are some focus points, some focus items around where we should be spending our time, our energy, and our precious resource of money, right? Okay, so I need you to do one thing, though, before we continue this conversation, and that one thing is I need you to pick a frame of reference. So everyone in here represents some kind of change. Who in here is from a higher ed institution? Most everybody. Who in here is a partner of a higher ed institution? Is there anybody else? There you go. Well, you're a partner of a higher ed institution. K-12. K-12. So the lens of this is going to be higher ed. We'll see how much it applies. I love it. So I need you to pick a frame of reference for today. What is your main strategic priority? So if you're on a campus, what's your main strategic priority? If you're a president or a provost or something like that. If you are a partner, what is your product? What is your solution you're offering? What is your big idea, right? So does everybody have an innovation in mind? A strategic priority in mind? Look to the person beside you, because I cautioned you have to be paired up, and just say what that is. Just share what that is. What is that priority? All right. Forced you to pick one, didn't I? So there you go. We're gonna keep moving. So I wanted you to pick that frame of reference. I need you to keep your idea in mind as we go through this conversation. All right? Your idea is precious. It's vulnerable. We need to keep it in mind. We want to make sure we're supporting it and making it happen. So keep your idea in mind as we go through here. And now I have a different question for you. What stops your idea? Okay? So a minute ago we said what stops ideas in general, and folks said fear. If I said, what stops your idea from working? How many of you would say fear has the first answer, right? It's a level of abstract that might be a little high when you apply it to your own particular idea, right? So we're going to talk about what stops your own particular idea, your own particular innovation. Making sense so far? Okay, very good. So I want to do a quick little revelation of the level of analysis and approach that I'm coming from. I represent the Council of Independent Colleges. We're a collection of 660 institutions. I think a lot of you know that in this room. Out of those institutions, we actually represent about 2 million learners. 2 million learners, a third of which are learners of color, and the others are traditional majority students. Our institutions give out a whole lot of financial aid across the sector. So 2 million students, 660 institutions, working to scale the changes that are around here. But today's conversation, we're gonna exit scale. Did anybody go to dinner last night? Anybody making it to dinner? Anybody's mind kind of still blown a little bit from that, all right? So we're gonna go the opposite direction today, and we're gonna go all the way down to the individual level. A conversation that we're not having much here today, a little bit on the individual level, to then ask about what does that mean for scale, all right? So as we're doing that, quick flash of the last 14 years, look to your partner and see if you can come up with 2 or 3 answers to this. You've got 1 minute. 2 or 3 answers to the questions here on the screen. See if you can partner beside you. Everybody got one? Give me an example of what you've said to each other. Who's got one? Who has an answer? Second Life. Second Life. Joel, and that's not a surprise for me. Second Life. Remember when Second Life was the thing? I do remember that. Who else has an answer? What do you got? MOOCs. MOOCs. By the way, this research, so this is actually research backed, came out of MOOCs, came out of conversations around implementing MOOCs. Fantastic. What else? Anything else? Let me give you a really great example, high impact practices. Most of our institutions are still not doing high impact practices. Lots of good research around those and what they mean. And here's a question, when you think of your idea, how does it connect to these other ideas that haven't made it through? So here's a frame of reference for you. Most of you have seen this curve before, the innovation curve. So what happens for us, think of the idea you just mentioned. How far did it get in penetration? Probably not very far. When you think of the idea that you all have, go back to the idea you had in your head, where does it sit on this chart? Is the idea further on the chart? Is it early in the chart? Where does it sit? For many of you, the ideas that you have, the things you're trying to get done on campus, are actually still sitting at the start of this chart. Really well-proven things have not permeated our campuses. We have great research, but we don't have implementation on our campus, right? So why is it? Why are we stuck in this chasm? So I want to just frame this reference for a minute. We have had years of failed ideas happening across higher education. Really good ideas that haven't necessarily failed, it's their implementation that has failed. Really proven things. And so I want to just sit in that minute for a second. We have great ideas, things that we know work, that are not spreading, right? That are not spreading. And so that's one of the places that we're coming from. I want to do another place that we're coming from. Let me put this in tech speak. Everybody know Moore's Law, right? Here's a version of that law. We're going kind of fast today. See that law? It's a good one, right? And we're going to make a new law today. Here's our new law. This seems to fit, doesn't it? Right? We'll call this the Harbor F law, right? It's just in our room. This is our little conversation for today. So think if you're at a campus, you've had all these ideas, they haven't failed, and everybody keeps doing everything predicting the apocalypse. It's all about the apocalypse on campus, right? It's a really harsh environment. So instead, for a few minutes today, instead of talking about that meteor, we're going to talk about this guy over here. We're going to talk about that person over there and what motivates those folks to change and to do something different. We're going to level our analysis down to there for a second. So I have a question for everybody in this room. My question for you is, who here, if you believe in the power of education, raise your hand as high as you can. Okay, now raise it a little higher. Right. See, we've been programmed to hold back, right? We've been programmed that when someone says do something, we should actually not do it all the way. And that programming on our campus is excessive. This slide I used to put up in front of campuses when I would go to them during COVID. I would compliment them on having done the impossible. How many of your campuses opened in the fall of COVID after COVID hit? How many of you went online? Right? You've done the impossible. I went and told campuses that, but what I didn't mention is that they have to keep going, right? They had to keep going through all of that. And so here are some implications. Your solution is not the first solution. And so you're coming delivering a strategic priority, and it's not the first one that your campus has seen. And honestly, if you're a president, you might be the third or fourth president in a five-year term, right? And so there's a lot of change. Your solution's not the first one. Campus is exhausted. We have to remember this. We have to do more to win individual support. And if there's one thing I would say here that is fascinating to me is this last one. For all of the vendors in the space, how many of them are talking about how to change? They're all coming with a change, but they're not coming with support about change in general, as much as I would offer is possible or necessary. And so we have an opportunity to do more around change itself as a topic. So we're going to talk about resistance right now, but to talk about resistance, we have to talk about something else first, and this is a little uncomfortable. We're going to talk about something that we've all brought this to the room. We all have one. Some of ours are big, some of ours are small. Some of us like to share ours with the world, and some of us are much more quiet about ours. And what these are our butts. We have lots of butts when it comes to change, and we encounter them throughout campus. And we're going to take a minute, and we're going to set and share about the butts that we have. And so to do this, what I want you to do, the butts, of course, are our stated reasons that we don't change. And to do this, we're going to do a quick little workshop. So my colleague Mike has butt cards. Mike is going to pass these around. Everybody gets a packet, Mike. And what I'd like y'all to do is in your pairs, if you don't have a pair, find a friend. I want you to look through these cards, and I need you to do three things. First, I need you to share your butts with each other. I need you to talk about quickly an experience with one of the butts. When has one of those shown up in your world? And I need you to pick your favorite butt out of the group, all right? I know yesterday we got to sit on cards on our butts, but we're not sitting on our butts today. We're going to get off our butts. So take a minute, look through your pairs of cards with your colleague, share an experience about one of the butts, and as a pair, pick your favorite butt.
actually contrary. Now this would be like, so ASU's great CRM, it's called Slate, and they just are unwilling to go through a methodical process of seeing what it's going to take to support this and actually deploy something sustainable, and also understand that the cost of change is quite critical. You know, so it kind of comes from twofold. Like I see it happen often where there's, like you said, the vendors are quick to say, here's where you want to be, but not how you get there.
It really is amazing to me because even we have a whole lot of vendors in the market come with a big change.
Yeah.
And you actually, the bigger the vendor, the more likely it is you're hiring a separate vendor to
help implement the change, yeah.
But still not around the culture piece of the climate,
the change. Yep.
So it's all topically focused instead of people focused,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's interesting. Who do you work with?
I went to CIC Salon, that's
Right. And who do you partner with, maybe?
Oh, FECC. So that's all the private institutions within.
Right. That's a good network.
Yeah, it's a really good network, and I think we're getting into like the possibility of buying consumer shoes right now, which might help out.
I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I still see folks chatting some, but we'll jump back in and keep us moving. What is a butt that was a favorite butt? These are all awkward sentences, aren't? But go ahead. What's a favorite butt that you've got? We can share a favorite butt. How about there you go? This leads to other questions that we have to answer first. That's a great butt. If you have not seen it, Google Seth Godin shaving the yak. Seth Godin shaving the yak. It is a fantastic short little column. It's a 2-minute read about how other questions lead to absolute nothing, right? You just kind of keep going down this trail, and eventually you're shaving a yak, by the way, is how the story goes. But it's worth doing. All right, who else had a favorite butt? The idea reduces the value of our degree, right? So whatever this is going to do, it's going to make our degree not as valuable, not as powerful. Huge argument against MOOCs, huge argument against almost anything where technology is coming into play. It's going to reduce the value of our degree. It's going to reduce the value of our experience, right? Who else? In the back there?
This will be more work for overburdened faculty and staff.
All right? This will be more work. There's another version. So there are about 55 objections that I've cataloged. Happy to share a list after the fact with anybody that wants them. There's a version of that that's a corollary, which is to say the same staff and faculty that do all the work will now have to do this too, right? And so you've got this small cadre of folks that you can pull on, and now they're going to have to do more, right? It's totally a great objection. It's not. I actually thought you were saying that that's why you weren't going to contribute. You're like, oh, that I don't have anything as good, right? So a huge argument is it's just not as good as what we already have, right? Well, you know, we're regressing. Any other butts? What other butts? There you go. Here you bend back. We've tried it before and it won't work here, right? Very good stated butt. We get that butt stated all the time. I am shocked how often that butt is stated, actually. I really thought that was a misnomer, but it is a stated butt. And then maybe, what'd you got?
This doesn't line up with our brand. And I would say this doesn't line up with our mission, right?
Right. Doesn't line up with our brand, doesn't line up with our mission, right? And so each of you had, I think, 10 total cards among you. I've got a list of about 55 of these. If you want to reach out afterwards, I'll share them with you. What I want to share with you right now, though, is an aggregate list of what these look like. These are the 10 stated butts. These are the butts that people show up with all the time when you come with an idea. So if you're pitching an idea to a campus, or if you're trying to get your campus to advance a strategic priority, these are the stated arguments. I'm going to clarify what I mean by that. These are the things that people will say out loud to you about why they don't like it. Right? They'll argue these points. And for how big this one is, how big the resources one is, the quality one actually, in my counts higher. Quality and pedagogy concerns. That's a huge one for campus. And so if you're coming with any idea, I don't care what it is, if you're not addressing the quality aspect, if you're not coming at it from a quality standpoint, then you're going to be in trouble. So one of the questions that I have for you with your idea is think of your idea for a moment. Are you prepared to respond to all of these things? The first thing I would be doing if I had a strategic priority is I'd go through that list and figure out what are some of my responses to those items. Am I ready when those objections come? Now, these are the stated objections. Let me show you one other list here. Less often stated, the silent 10, right? It is harder for people to say this, though I will say, post-COVID, they are saying some of these more. Post-COVID, the exhaustion, it is more okay for people to say they're exhausted. But the reason this is on a separate list is that previous list is what they're going to argue about. I don't believe in the quality of this program. I'm not sure it's proven. I don't really like it. I don't have enough data. What they're actually saying is, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I don't know what's going to happen. People are less worried about change, friends. They're far more worried about where they will be after the change. And if whatever effort you are approaching and bringing doesn't address where they will be after the change, then you're going to be in trouble. I'll highlight just one other. So this misalignment of staffing, of hierarchy, is a huge one. And it's so big that if I give you a composite list, so here's one other thing, a composite list of all of those other ideas can fit underneath these three umbrellas. So here's a point for us today as you're advancing your change. We spend a whole lot of time in the first column. We spend a whole lot of time logically arguing with people when the issues are actually emotional or organizational. Okay? So the conference, I just was at another conference 3 days ago. It was a conference with 45 people. It felt very similar. And it was a conference about faith and vocation, right? So from a 45-person conference on faith and vocation to this event. And at this conference, one of the folks was talking about how they were a vegan. And they were discussing the conversation of veganism. And I thought, veganism in this model, right? If I'm trying to push someone into veganism or promote veganism, I have some rational arguments about it, but there's also emotional arguments. But the structural piece, if I actually can't buy the food I need or can't afford it, well, then I'm not going to be able to pull off that. If you think about politics, we spend a lot of time arguing about this philosophical, rational part. We don't know how to engage in the emotional part about politics. And the fact of the matter is, with electoral college and other pieces, the structure actually makes change hard. So we're arguing with each other trying to make change about politics when it's actually a structural issue. And so my question for you all with the change that you're trying to promote on campus is, do you have the organization set up to do it? Are you doing anything around hearts? Are you doing anything around the temperament? Are you doing anything around the exhaustion in addition to the logical arguments? Making sense? Okay. So implications for this is, which area do you need more support for out of all of those? Minds, hearts, structure. What arguments might you better answer ahead of time? And how do you do that? And then this last one, is there a next level that you can rise up to with your communications and with your efforts? I'm going to go back 2 slides. I'm going to ask you one other question. I'd like you to take 2 minutes with your partner, and I'd like you to come up with one thing that you can do to alleviate or respond to one of these stated objections. So just 2 minutes. I'm going to watch the clock. If you wanted to respond to quality concerns, what's one thing you might do? If you wanted to respond to one of these items, you've got 2 minutes. What would that be? Go for it. So I don't think it's off base at all. The reason I wanted to come back to this, and the reason I'm happy that we had a moment or two for this 2-minute conversation, is I think the answer to most of these is involving people in the conversation. And so on our campuses, in our culture, in our community, agency is massively important. Oh, and you had that answer. And so when I think of quality concerns, I think, how do you involve faculty in the evaluation of whatever you're trying to do? And so if you're piloting something, how do you do that? If you're worried about brand implications, why don't you pilot it? We're not committing to this. We'll give it a try for a little bit, right? And so where can you bring other people into that conversation and have them assist? Hugely valuable. So the things I would do with this list is I'd look through and say, what are my own kind of responses to this? And then how might I engage others in responding to this? That might be a good way to set it up. So we've gone through these resistance pieces, and now I want to give a little bit of hope, right? A little bit of what works, right? What works? So here is a question for everybody. Well, actually, here before we go to the question, I just, whenever I have a chance to throw that quote in, I'm always happy to throw that quote in. It's a pretty good one, right? And so we have this impression that change is really, really, really hard on our campuses. And so then we have to figure out how to get over that and how to get around that. And so here's the question. What motivates a college leadership team to innovate? What motivates a college leadership team to innovate? All right, it's a really interesting question. I'm gonna ask a follow-up for everybody in this room. Wait, before I do that, think of an answer. I mean, pause. I don't always pause. Take 10 seconds. What motivates a college leadership team to innovate? And here is a question back to you. So why are you here? What motivates you to be here and in this conversation? Not this conversation, this whole conversation. What motivates you to be here? Anybody? Choice, okay. FOMO. FOMO. I love it. Equity, right? Equity. So here is a list of 11 motivators. This is very higher ed focused. I think our other lists are a little bit more broad, but this is a list of 11 innovation motivations that people will tell you will get them up in the morning. Okay? Notice the top one is an inverse of one of the hesitations from the last slides, right? People are happy to be motivated about quality and improving it. That's a motivation factor. But if you don't address it, it's a resistance piece. People are very interested in positioning, to be first, to be a leader, not to be left behind. FOMO, right? I want to be where the people are. I want to get attention. That's not negative. I don't mean that negatively. If you're trying to stand out, a great motivation is we can get attention doing whatever it is we're doing. Affordability and access, I probably could list those together. I list them separately. There's a little different version between those two. Those motivate people. Those motivate almost everyone here. That's why we're here. This is an equity conference as much as it is a tech conference, right? Those are motivating factors. Demand, responding to demand will motivate people. All of those will motivate people. I want to go to the last one. What do individuals get out of whatever this is that you're asking them to do? When I think across the institutions I've visited, and I worked with about 100 institutions over a 6-year period, there were very few that set up individual motivations for people. What do I personally get out of this? How do I personally benefit from this? MOOCs was mentioned earlier. When Georgia Tech was evolving MOOCs, the first campus that offered 4-credit MOOC classes, they paid all of their staff and faculty extra money to engage in that activity. They resourced it so that they would go and innovate. They got something out of that. And so for us, I would ask, how are we incentivizing that work? So just one or two more things. Again, these are those pieces there. They're good to remember, good to think about. A couple takeaways from this: what motivates my team to do this work? If I was on an exec team, I might look around that group and say, what motivates people in this room, right? If I am looking as a partner, what motivates the institutions I'm working with? What motivates their leadership? What motivates the other people on the team? I think that's worth some time. And how am I incentivizing my big idea so that it works? So here's a little takeaway for folks. Bill Gates is speaking, I think, somewhere in a second, right? So here's a Bill Gates quote. I kind of liked it. And since we did this a minute ago, we'll change it up for just a second for us. I will offer to you that this conversation that we've been having about individual level is actually a scale question. How do we scale change agency? How do we create a culture and a product and a conversation that can scale change? Because right now, we're just coming with individual products and not with a conversation about change on large. Whoever can figure out how to do that has a lot of potential to make changes in our system. So with that said, it will also preserve a rich, diverse education system. One last little thing I'll share with you just as a teaser and a goodbye. Here are components of successful change. There they are right there. If you have them all, you have alignment and success. But if you're missing one, you've got trouble. And so what I often see when folks are showing up is we come with solutions that are often about action plans, right? Here's an action. We're going to do it. Occasionally, we have resources from granting bodies that might show up in this room. Sometimes we might incentivize that. There's lots of conversation here about skills and helping make sure people have the skills. But that leaves off 2 of these items off that list. And so how do we make sure when we're bringing change to our organizations, we're hitting all of those factors? With that said, I'll leave you with this quote. This was what someone said to me when I was on a campus talking about the change they were trying to implement. They just said, I just want it to matter. I just want it to matter. So good luck with your change. I hope it matters. I hope it works on your campus. Thanks for coming in today.